Hello, my name is Tom Cryer. I'm an attorney in Shreveport, Louisiana. I've been practicing here for over 34 years. And for years now, I have refused to file tax returns or to pay income taxes unless the government could show me any lawful authority for its demand that I do either one. As a result, I have been accused by the federal government of committing tax evasion and of committing willful failure to file a tax return. This is a story that you need to know about. This is a story about which you need to be aware, because it ended last week in my acquittal, a total, unanimous, not guilty verdict by 12 jurors in federal court here in Shreveport, Louisiana. In fact, you will not see this story on any of the mainstream media. ABC, CBS, CNN, even Fox News isn't going to cover this story. So the only way that we're going to get this news is through this video, which is why it's important that you forward this video or its URL to as many people as you can, because people need to know the truth that that jury found out about last week. And that truth is that, first, there is no law that makes the average American citizen liable for the income tax. Second, that what is income is only the profit that is generated from some taxable activity. Third, that your earnings and wages cannot be separated into principal and profit or capital and profit, and therefore are not income as defined by the Supreme Court. And fourth, that your fundamental God-given right to earn a living through any lawful occupation, which has been recognized as being just as fundamental and just as basic and just as constitutionally protected as your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion, is not a taxable activity that is exempt from taxation by Congress or any other entity. And therefore, even if you took the statutes that say first exclude exempt income, and you exempted everything that resulted from your exercising your fundamental right to earn a living through any lawful occupation, then you will find that you probably have a near zero gross income. Are you going to be required to file a return if you have no gross income? According to the law, not according to me? Probably not. But you're still filing the things, and they're still taking your money. You need to know your rights. You need to know the truth. You need to know what the government's rights and authority is in connection with your personal earnings. Go to truthattack.org. Learn the truth. Go to liefreezone.com. Learn the truth. And once you know that truth, take that truth to the rest of the country. Take it to your friends, your neighbors, your countrymen, because they are being victimized as well. Go to truthattack.org, liefreezone.com. Learn the truth and share it. Thank you. Hello, I'm Tom Cryer. I'm an attorney, and I've got some shocking news for you. It was shocking to me when I heard it. I didn't believe it. You may not believe it when I tell you. But the fact is that the average American is not liable for any income taxes on his wages, salaries, and personal earnings. And that's a fact. I didn't believe it. I didn't buy it, and I spent the next 2 years trying to prove that it wasn't true. Instead, I learned that it absolutely was true. You've been taken for years when there is absolutely not one single law that says that you are liable for income taxes. There's not one single law that establishes a tax rate on you. There is not one single law or even regulation given the force of law that establishes what a standard exemption is with respect to you. Now, I can't blame you for being skeptical about this. I was more than skeptical. I thought that my friend who told me this had gone nuts. But it's a fact. It's the truth. And after 2 years of research and digging and trying to find a way to prove it to be false, all I could do was come to the conclusion that yes, it is true. You are submitting yourself to taxes to which you are not liable. Ask your accountant, ask your attorney to dig up the law that says that you are liable for the income tax, and ask him to show it to you. Thousands have asked the federal government to show them the law. And the federal government, the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Treasury, the Office of the President, none of them have been able to respond with any single statute or any single regulation that makes the average American liable for an income tax. If you want to know the whole story on this, you can go to the Lie Free Zone. That's liefreezone.com, and obtain this memorandum. This memorandum sets out all of the law applicable to the issue of what coverage the income tax law does have and what it does not cover, and why it does not cover. You know and I know that if the Congress could tax you, they would. If they could, they would have, but they couldn't, so they haven't. So they pretend. Congress and the law doesn't say you owe the tax. The Internal Revenue Service says that you owe the tax in a publication called the Instructions to Your 1040 Form. Those instructions are nothing but instructions. They are no more law than Time Magazine or Mad Magazine or the New York Times. The fact that there is no law is made just as plain as it can be by Aaron Russo's documentary film. Aaron Russo, the award-winning filmmaker, has produced a documentary that establishes that the government absolutely refuses to respond to any question concerning on what authority do you make the man on the street pay an income tax on his wages, on his weekly pay, on his monthly salary, on his personal earnings that he earns with his own labor and his own industry. The saddest part is that if we were to corner the government and make them admit, they would have every right to turn around and tell you, look, don't blame me. I didn't make you fill in the form the way you did. I told you on line 1 that all I was taxing was taxable income. I didn't ask you to put down non-taxable income, but you did. You did that to yourself. We told you in statutes and regulations, plain as can be, that we don't want you to put down in your gross income and on your tax return income that's exempt, or revenues and receipts that may not meet the constitutional definition of income. But you kept doing it. What are we supposed to do? Slap your hand, make you fill out your form a different way? You did this to yourself, and you keep on doing it, and you keep on doing it, and you keep on doing it, and our fathers and grandfathers have kept on doing it. Well, it's time to know the truth. It's time for the truth to get out. If you want the whole story on this, go to Lie Free Zone and check it out. Pull the memo down. Go to freedomtofascism.com, get Aaron Russo's film. I didn't believe my friend. You don't have to believe me. But in the segments that follow this, I'm going to show you, and in the memorandum that you can obtain at liefreezone.com, it will show you exactly why you've been taken, or worse, been tricked into taking yourself to the cleaners at the expense of your family and your community, the entire life. It's time for it to stop. Go to liefreezone.com. Find out how. Who is liable for the income tax? Maybe you, maybe not. Let's look at the law. The law on the income tax is all contained in Title 26 of the United States Code. This law is law that must be strictly construed. By that, what is meant is that any act or any statute that's in derogation of rights or property must be construed literally. Nothing can be inferred, nothing can be implied, and nothing can be drawn from it as an indication of general intent. Either the law states clearly that you are liable or you're not liable. If the law does not state clearly that your income is taxed, it is not taxed. It must be clearly and plainly laid. And if the law can be interpreted more than one way, then that law must be interpreted against the tax collector and in favor of the citizen. So let's examine the law for a minute. The first law in the United States Code, in the income tax law, which is subtitle A of Title 26, is Section 701. It tells us that partners are liable for the income tax, but only in their separate or individual capacities. We don't know what liability they have yet in a separate individual capacity, so that doesn't tell us anything yet. The next law that we can find on liability deals with non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. There's a discussion in Section 884 that states that the foreign branch, corporation's branch tax, is to be paid for and is that the foreign corporation shall be liable. But that's not the income tax. Section 1461, any tax under this chapter is hereby made liable for such tax. Now we found somebody made liable. What chapter are we talking about? The chapter is Chapter 3 of Subtitle A, entitled Withholding of Tax on Non-Resident Aliens and Foreign Corporations. So if you are withholding taxes on a non-resident alien or a foreign corporation, then you are liable for the payment of that tax that you've withheld. Nowhere else in Subtitle A is there any provision making anyone liable for this income tax. There is, I finally find, in Section 3403, a provision concerning withholding of taxes under Subtitle C, which is employment taxes, not income taxes. But it says that the employer shall be liable for the payment of the tax required to be deducted and withheld under this chapter. Earlier, in 3401, it describes employees and wages. Let's assume, for the purpose of this discussion, that these are income taxes and that he's liable for income taxes. So if you are a person required to withhold taxes from a non-resident alien or a foreign corporation or from an employee as defined in subtitle C, Employment Taxes, Chapter 24, then you might be liable. Have I included you yet? I haven't included me yet. Now, is this typical for tax laws? I don't think so. Every tax law always clearly states the subject. Every tax law always clearly states the person liable. I have 25 other federal taxes here. In each and every case of these taxes, they've all first defined exactly what the subject of the tax is, and second, they have defined precisely who is responsible for paying that tax. Only in the income tax law is there no or virtually no liability provisions, and there is no law making you liable unless you are one of the individuals I just listed out that does the law. If you want to see more on that, get this film, Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism, at freedomtofascism.com, and get, for an entire list of these statutes, get the memorandum from liefreezone.com and study for yourself. Make up your own mind. but the law is not there. And the reason that Mr. Russo could not get the government to tell him what the law was is because there is no law, and the government will not admit. Now, we've talked about who is taxed, and it may or may not be you. If you're an employer or you're withholding income taxes on foreign corporations or non-resident aliens, then you're liable. But what is taxed? The code says that it taxes taxable income. And at first glance, that appears to be under their definition of taxable income, which is gross income minus deductions. However, their definition of taxable income and their means of arriving at taxable income is a little more complicated than that. It tells us to look to the regulations, and in particular, it tells us to look to regulations such as Code of Federal Regulations, Section 861, which tells us how to calculate taxable income from sources of income from within and without the U.S. Now, what do we learn from these is shocking, nothing less than shocking. And that the first thing that we find out from these sections is that in addition to the deductions set out in the code that you and I are familiar with, that we also should deduct those items of income that cannot be included in gross income to start with. Now that tells us that there are items defined in the definition of gross income that cannot be included in gross income. Otherwise, there'd be no need to deduct them. It's one step farther. We go to 861.8, where it tells us to find a list of those things that can be included, and we find nothing that pertains to the average working stiff here in the United States. The items that they show are all foreign income, income from the territories, from Virgin Islands, from sources on merchant marine vessel contracts. If you're engaged in any of those, then perhaps your income is taxable. But if not, maybe it isn't. Now in 861.8t, we find another little shocking revelation, and that is that some income is actually exempt from income. Now these are vestigial remnants of previous provisions that acknowledged openly that some income should not be included in gross income because it is exempt from taxation by the federal government. In other words, those items that cannot be taxed by the federal government under the Constitution. It also, in these previous versions of the code and the regulations, frankly admitted that some items of income are not income within the meaning of income as defined in the 16th Amendment and the Constitution. Nowhere in the income tax law do we find a definition of income. Income has been defined by the Supreme Court, but not by the statutes. The question here, though, on taxable income is that the government has indicated to us now that the only thing they're taxing is what is taxable. And they say these things are not taxable, such as exempt income and income that cannot be included in gross income. Yet they don't tell us what is exempt. It gives us 4 examples of what is not exempt, not what is exempt. And all 4 of those examples are examples of income that is not from the average typical American. 3 of those 4 are foreign sources, and the 4th is from the territories, any territory of the United States. But are you living in a territory? If you're earning money from a territory, then your income wouldn't be exempt. If you are not, then perhaps it is. The point that we have here is that the statutes and the code and the regulations promulgated do not establish that your income, very likely, if you're working for a living and earning wages, fails to demonstrate that your income is clearly and plainly within the scope of the income tax law. We know that you, more than likely, are not among those made liable, and now we know that your income may or may not be included. But as we pointed out at the beginning, if your income is not expressly and clearly and plainly identified as taxed, then your income is not taxed. You cannot tax someone by inference or implication. It has to be clear and plain. So the next thing that you have to do is to find out, is your income within the constitutional power of the United States to tax? Is it exempt under the Constitution? Is your income really income within the meaning of the 16th Amendment and the United States Constitution? And I think that just as I was surprised to learn some things on this, that you will be surprised too. I was shocked to learn that the 16th Amendment did not authorize the income tax, as I'd always been taught. This isn't me telling you this. This is the Supreme Court telling us this time and time and time again. I was also surprised to find out that much of my earnings over my lifetime have been exempt from taxation because either they were outside the taxing authority or they were exempt because they were the result of my exercising a fundamental right, just like the right to free speech and the right to worship as I choose. All of these different exemptions, all of these different limitations on the power of the federal government to tax are covered in the memorandum that you can obtain at the liefreezone.com. That's liefreezone.com. You can obtain this memorandum, download it, read it, educate yourself. Taxable income is a segment that we could spend an hour and a half on and not complete. But you know now that the statute does not clearly define taxable income, does not define the income at all, and it states that some income is not taxable and that some income is exempt. But it doesn't identify which income is not taxable under the Constitution. It does not tell you which income is exempt from taxation. And so it's up to you to dig it out and find out, because up until now, you've been filling out your forms, and the chances are that you've been filling out your forms to include non-taxable income. And again, who do we have to blame for that? The government can say, all I asked you to do was to put down taxable income. I warned you that some income is exempt and not taxable by the federal government under the Constitution. I warned you that some income is not really income, that just because you've received money doesn't mean it was income within the meaning of the 16th Amendment and the Constitution. So who's to blame if you keep on putting income down that is not taxable, or income down that is not income, and paying taxes on it? Are you going to continue to do that? Or are you going to continue to educate yourself and find out what your rights are under the law? Not according to me. Not according to other people who say they know the law. I'm talking about the law according to the United States Supreme Court, according to the Constitution itself, and according to the statutes and the regulations that the government has written, not me. Everything that I have told you so far is exactly what they said, not what I said. And so be not fooled by these implications. Do not continue to be fooled by your own lack of understanding of your rights. This is an awful lot of your sweat, an awful lot of your toil represented that the government has been taking for years, for generations. Find out. Go to liefreezone.com. Get the memorandum. Read the material on that website and learn for yourself what income is truly taxable under the income tax law. Right, now, I've told you in very general terms about the fact that no law makes you liable for the tax, and that the tax does not clearly and plainly include most Americans' taxes. But the details and the actual authorities that tell you why that's drawn that way, and what income and what people can be taxed by the federal government, you need to get this memorandum at Lie-Free Zone. Once you've done this, once you've studied this, once you realize what the truth is, then the question is going to be, what do we do about it? What can you do about the big lie that's been perpetrated and the big trick that's been played on the American worker? Odds are 9 out of 10 that your income has never been taxable. And when you read this memorandum, you'll be able to tell then whether your income is or is not taxable income and taxed by the income tax law. What you can do is to demand the truth from the government. Write your congressman, email your congressman. It's simple. You click on, go on the net, and you can email your congressman, email your senator, and demand to be told exactly what law makes you liable for the income tax, exactly what law makes you have to pay over a part of your hard-earned wages and your hard-earned salary to the federal government every year. Demand to know the truth from them, and demand to insist on telling the truth to your neighbor. Together, all of us demanding to know the truth, the lie will have to stop. The lie will have to quit. And why is this important? Because all of this excess revenue that the federal government was never intended by the founding fathers to have has allowed it to outgrow its intended role, to take over and to usurp issues and decisions that you and I are supposed to be able to make on a state-by-state basis. 56% of the federal budget is spent on regulatory agencies and government bureaucracies that the Constitution never authorized. 56% of the budget that we are now funding with your hard-earned wages that are exempt from taxation by the federal government are spent where they are not permitted to be in the first place. Those funds should stay here with your state. Those funds should make you pay for the state government instead of the federal government handing money back to the states with strings attached, depriving you of the control of your own state legislatures by telling them that they will have to vote the federal way rather than your way. That's why this is important. You can do this. You can be a voice of truth. You can be a beacon of truth. You can demand that the big lie stops. Go to Lie-Free Zone. Pull down this memo. Study. Find out how to get in touch with your congressman online. Write them hard mail. Do whatever it takes, but keep demanding to know the truth, because they cannot answer that question, and the reason they cannot answer that question is there is no law.